I feel like that scene kind of softens the blow of her death later on a little bit because like she's lived her own life too. Like she's done all these things and
Because she
she
was a whore in Casablanca. Is that what you're saying, Alon?
you don't
What an
really
asshole.
live. You don't really live until you become a whore in Casablanca. Okay, David?
Well, that's my plan. Second life.
I finally watched. I finally watched.
I
Finally
watched. I
finally
watched.
I finally watched.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of I Finally Watched. This is David.
And this is Alon. And I finally watched Jojo Rabbit. And today we have a very special guest, Nikko, who is a podcaster himself and has multiple podcasts. Well, Nikko, if you could just tell people where they can find you, and your TikTok, your Twitter, your podcasts.
Thank you so much, my friend. Yeah, so I have a lot that I randomly do an appearance. I'll do like the condensed version. So Twitter is at Nikko Caruso. That's NIKKOCARUSO. I spell it way differently than almost everyone. And then on TikTok, it's at Nikko Knows Film, which sounds pretentious, I know, but it was like the three N's, or it's like the two N's, which works. And my Twitter is the best place to find me, reach me, talk to me. And all my other shows I do some comic book ones. I've been on some other film ones. You can see that all in my Twitter bio. And then TikTok is mainly film reviews and light commentary on the award season that's really picking up for film. So come talk to me. I love talking. I love forming connections, being on shows. But I'm just happy to be here talking about this movie, and cool to be on the show for the first time. I'm finally on I Finally Watched. I get to say that, right?
I think this is cool. This is a cool movie we're doing because I tend to be the one who has like finally watched the films. At least, I mean, David and I had a good 50-50 run for a while, but then it's just kind of like, because David's so fucking old, he's watched more movies than I have.
This is from 2019.
Shut up. So, but it's cool that you got to choose this film, Nikko, especially since David and I actually had this film on our minds quite recently. We like to do films that are at least 3 years old or older, and so this one just so happens to hit the mark this year, so it works out beautifully. But my experience with it is cool in a sense that I didn't think I would like it as much as I did. And not only did I like it, but I have to say it is like now in my top like 10 or 15 movies of all time. I liked it that much. I personally like kind of rate a movie on the emotional impact it has me, like whether it makes me laugh or cry or just some sort of like emotional, in my soul, I feel the film, and that's how I judge if it's a good film or not for myself. And the fact that not only have I seen it once this week, but I've seen it twice this week, and I probably cried more on the second watch. I think that says a lot. So Nikko, what was your experience on like the first time you watched this?
Well, first of all, I mean, I don't want to bury the lead too much how I feel about it, but that makes me so happy to hear because I also love this movie a significant amount. And I'm the same type of viewer as you are. So it's cool that as I've gotten to know you now, I hear how you digest film, is that I'm a very emotional viewer as well. So if you can get a lot of emotion out of me, I will rate the movie higher. It's why I was someone, I was probably in the minority of film Twitter who was very happy that Coda won Best Picture last year. Because that movie was really emotionally effective for me. And I also have experience and work with people with exceptionalities when it comes to language and communication, whether it be speech or hearing. So that movie hit me significantly. But my experience with this movie is I remember seeing it back in 2019 in theaters, actually. And at the time, I was going back and forth on if I liked Taika or not. Because I liked What We Do in the Shadows, love Hunt for the Wilder People.
Oh, yeah.
Did not like Ragnarok.
Get the fuck out of here. Get out of here
David.
right now.
Sorry, David. Did not like Ragnarok because I'm like, oh, I didn't want how he makes movies. I didn't like it for that story in Thor.
I understand that.
To appreciate it, but like
I
I'm
understand
also a
that.
big comic book guy. So my opinion of the comic book film is also sometimes so tied to the source material. I hate myself for it. I don't actually hate myself for it, but I can be hated for it. Example right now. But anyway, so I walked into Jojo Rabbit and I knew I was gonna I knew it was gonna be funny because that's he normally hits with his humor for me and just the satire of everything. I knew I was gonna have a good time with that and from trailers or anything. I didn't know it was gonna emotionally hit me like a freight train,
Destroy you.
walking the theater, wiping tears from me.
Yeah.
And I also so that's my experience with it. I really liked it. And then when COVID hit, and we had to stay inside, I still lived with my parents at the time. I was in grad school, and I remember this is one of the movies I showed my dad, and my dad could be a really tough sell for movies. And I threw this one on, and I'm like, oh, I don't think he's gonna like it. And he was like, he was sobbing by the end of the movie, and then was calling people the next day saying like, have you seen Jojo Rabbit? I love this effing movie so much. So so like a cool additional story to it. But yeah, I was not expecting to be as emotionally floored as I was. And yeah.
So, and I don't know if Alon remembers this, but we had our first kid like July of 2019. So we did not make it to the theaters much from then until the start of COVID. And then, you know, obviously I've probably seen like maybe like 6 or 7 movies in theaters since then. And Alon and his now wife, are like, oh, we want to watch that with you. I was like, oh, okay, but we live in different cities. And so eventually Ashley and I just watched it one night and we told them, and they were like, what the fuck? You're supposed to wait for us on that. And I was like, yeah.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah. So I watched it while I was on a work thing, and when I came home, which was just yesterday, actually, I turned it on and I was like, I gotta watch it a second time just to get a refresher for the episode. Will you watch it with me? And she was like, yeah, I wanted to watch this with you in theaters, and we didn't. And I go, yeah, I wonder why we didn't. And that's right, David. Now I freaking know why we didn't, because of you.
Well, yeah, but I didn't watch it until like January. I watched it like in preparation for the Oscars that year. And I still haven't seen like Little Women from that year, which I bought it and I need to watch it, but I also need to watch like 1,000 movies.
Sure.
And so and so it's like, it always is like, oh, I need to watch that. I just finished John Wick 3 today, which I have a lot of thoughts on, but not for this podcast. But I feel the same way about this. I will also say Alon has about 200 movies in his top 15 movies. So if you ever actually tried to get him to list it,
I cry a lot. Okay,
I can relate to you there, my friend.
But yeah, I love this movie. It was also kind of funny to see, because I listened to some movie podcasts, like a little bit of the backlash about the movie, you know, because of the Hitler. And I just didn't really
Let's talk about the Hitler in the room.
Yeah.
And I didn't, but just to say, like, I didn't really, I can understand that backlash, but I think it's like wrong. You know what I mean? Like, I get why it happens, but I don't agree with it.
I'm glad you brought up the backlash piece, because like kind of like you both said, like I get it, but I also think it's wrong. Because the movie's a satire, and it is never. I think it's maybe just the image, because the swastika and Hitler, it's so ingrained in our minds visually as being just this bad thing, and it is. But the movie is a satire, and it's making fun of how they use propaganda and stuff, and it's also making fun of Hitler. So that's why for some of the backlash it got, or for some of the negative reviews of the satire, I'm like, I don't get it, because it is not one time even trying to say that any of this was okay. The reason why I think what he does with this is so genius too is it was Bo Burnham, I believe. He said this quote in one of his specials, which really resonated in me. He said, you can tell anyone anything if you make it funny. If you make something funny, you can tell anyone anything, and then you reflect on it and get it. And I love how there's a really dark story here, and the way that the Nazi Party they did this with their youth, but also with the people who tried to stand up to it is terrible. It's disgusting. But if they made a movie that was so self-serious like that, the message might not, resonate as much, or it might be a film that turned people off because it's so depressing. So he made it really funny so we could digest it and talk about it. But then I bet if we tried to record a whole episode just on all the serious thematic stuff in here, we could go all day because that's how genius it was.
I feel like when we try to do an episode on a movie that is just a comedy, like a plain comedy, David and I find that we kind of run dry very quickly, and those tend to be our shorter episodes. And I feel like on a
Coming
movie,
in 3 weeks, grind.
I find also that if the movie is really serious, the only way that we are able to get, like, David and I, we try to always put like a comedic spin in all of our episodes.
Of course.
I mean, just our cold opens are like the funniest, or the second. I always say they're the second funniest part of the episode, and you have to listen to the whole episode to find the funniest.
I love that.
So the most serious episodes are always the funniest episodes for us, and the comedies are always kind of, I hate to say it, but kind of the most boring episodes for us. And I think
it's quoting lines the entire time.
It's quoting lines that were funny. So when something is super serious, like the Nazi Party in World War II and stuff like that, and you go to reflect on it, you can't help make fun of it in a funny way if it's not just your kind of your defense mechanism to go towards that kind of stuff like that.
It normally is.
But it's like what did they say? The best comedy comes from tragedy, right?
Yes, and that's amen.
So when I was watching this movie, it reminded me of a lot of Wes Anderson stuff a bunch, and so I was like, this is like if Moonrise Kingdom meets Schindler's List, and it's like
maybe not Schindler's List.
When you see the people hanging and the people getting shot, like just straight, I mean, that's very Schindler's List-ish. And I don't know, but then you have like the little kid stuff, and you have the imaginary Hitler and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, that's, if I had to describe this movie to someone who has never heard or seen this movie, I would be like, Moonrise Kingdom meets Schindler's List. That's the film.
Maybe do a better job of explaining it. So one of the comments, like when I was hearing people talk about the movie, someone said that they were in a theater and people were laughing, and they didn't know if people were laughing for like the right reasons, right? And it's like, I don't know. I mean, if something's fun, like this movie's clearly the entire time making fun of Nazis, right? So even in the parts where like Thomasin McKenzie is describing Jews as like, like there are funny lines where he's like, all right, well, tell me where the queen Jew is and where she lays her eggs. Like, it's absurd. And it's funny because you have this kid and some of the other Nazis who believe it, like Rebel Wilson. And then like you have Sam Rockwell is like a more nuanced like character, but it's funny because of the absurdity of it, and it's poking fun at the idiot. Like Thomasin McKenzie even one point says, "You're really an idiot, aren't you?" You know what I mean? And the other thing that what I like about this movie, and it's something I read that Taika Waititi said. I read it after watching it the first time this week and before I watched it the second time, because originally when I watched it, I was like, this movie's just so funny. What are we going to talk about? But then he was like, what I wanted to do is make a movie where everything seems pretty normal, and just underneath is the Third Reich. And so for Jojo, everything is normal. And he doesn't really notice all of these things until it's pointed out to him, until as he grows. But it's right underneath. You know, there's a scene like at dinner where the mom's like, oh, I'm not eating. And it's because she's saving it for Elsa. But it's like she doesn't have enough to make food for 3 people because of how bad things are in Germany. And if you look at what she has, it's like a piece of bread and like one other thing. You know what I mean? Like, things are really bad, but you have to kind of look for it. And I imagine it would be, you know, somewhat similar to be in that place where it's like you have to go on living your normal life as the Americans are like moving closer and closer each day, as the Russians are coming from the other side. You know what I mean? So I think it's kind of, at least trying to be a little bit true to what the experience may have been like, but also it's just like, yeah, it's trying to show in a satirical way, like, these guys were idiots. And it's,
Mhm.
you know, I think it helps obviously that I think Taika Waititi is like part Jewish, but it's
And
like, go
And
ahead.
it goes off what you said too. Yeah, sorry. And it goes off what you said too to build on it. And I think this is why his direction in the film is so strong. And I'll talk about a little bit more about his direction later. But he's also capturing, because you're following Jojo so much, he's capturing the innocence that Jojo has. The world does seem normal to him. He's a kid, but because he's a kid, it is so much easier for the propaganda to absorb him, because kids kind of just go with what they see as normal, but they're also easy to manipulate. And that's why the movie's brilliant on rewatch, because the more you watch it, you're seeing things from Jojo's lens, but then because you're an audience member, we're older, we start noticing all the other detail and nuances of the other adults, and you're starting to see that deeper, scarier thing. For example, I love that you brought up that Sam Rockwell is a very nuanced character, because as the film progresses, you see he's not even a firm believer, obviously, in what they're doing. He just does it because he has to. Like, that's his role. His role is to educate this kid. He knows it's wrong, and that pays off with Jojo at the end when he saves his life. He knows he doesn't want this for Jojo. He's better than it. He knew that his mom Rosie was a good person. So it's yeah, no, I'm starting to cry. Here come the waterworks, right?
That's
It's
the
one of those
tears.
scenes of the movie.
One
So-
of my favorite lines in the whole movie is, like, actually I have two favorite lines in the whole movie. One's like super funny, one's super funny serious. One is of course I'm a Nazi, I'm totally into swastikas.
It's
Like-
so, I love that breakdown in like the language too. Like, it's so funny.
Oh, and then my other one is when Elsa draws a picture. She's like, he wants her to draw pictures of the Jews, and so she draws a picture of his like ugly head, and he goes, "This is just my head." And he's like, "You were gonna tell me you were gonna draw a picture where the Jews live?" And she's like, "Yeah, they live in your head." And
Yeah,
you know, I was like, "Oh, it's so fucking good."
it's
I thought
so
you were
good.
gonna bring up the line because we were talking about Sam Rockwell, and I think if you were gonna have like an actual issue with this movie, and it's an issue that Sam Rockwell runs into a lot, it's painting a bad person as a sympathetic figure. You know, because you have three billboards just a few years later, or no, a few years before. When the few years, it took a couple years before, and but I don't actually think it is doing that, because Sam Rockwell even has this line at the very end, and he's like, you know, "I'm sorry about Rosie," talking about his mother. "She was a good person." He's like, an actual good person, you know, because it's kind of it's kind of talking about himself, like,
yeah.
he's a good person in this movie, but she's like an actual good person because she had the will to like fight openly against these people, openly, semi-openly, whereas he was kind of doing a couple things but being hidden for the most part, and still like wearing
He
the
was
uniform.
mostly a coward. Yeah.
I think that's represented so well in Elsa giving him the documents of the sister, and her getting the birth date wrong. And you could, right, because the Gestapo comes, and Sam Rockwell kind of figures that he's been found out, so he like starts to hand over the papers, and that's not what he's interested in. And if he did, though, if he grabbed those papers from Sam Rockwell and saw that the birth date was wrong, you could easily just say, "Oh, he's missing one eye." He could say, "Oh, that 7 looked like a 1 to me," or "That 1 looked like a 7 to me," or however which way they came about it, right? But he knew who she was, because he's known that family for years. I have to assume.
Yeah.
Like, there's no record of his sister's death, like he explained. But Sam Rockwell's character knows that little girl died, and at least that's the way I took it. And I think another great thing about this movie is all the subtlety, is like the interpretation that you can take it from yourself. Like, the characters know this or that. Nothing else. Nothing is too much thrown in the audience's face, like an over explanation of everyone and how they know each other and blah 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 blah. But what you get from the relationships is what you fill in the gaps in your head. And so that's like a good representation scene of his nuanced character, is him kind of protecting a Jew on a fact that a girl he knows is a Jew. And that's kind of the beginning. So I mean, I can see that, but also those people are just wrong. So there you go.
Yeah. I also love too a big nuanced part of his character that has, once again, there's everything that's really, really funny in here. I also do believe have a bigger thematic thing to it, but his subtle relationship with Alfie Allen's character too is just so funny, and like their performances too of it are pitch perfect until they're like fully embraced at the end and all their like outfits and everything. But it's like the first time when he like stares at him and they like look at each other's mouths and he's like, and then he goes back. Like they build that's such a funny nuance part of it is that like they're in love with each other.
And then he has
Such a fun movie.
the pink triangle at the end too to signify
Yes,
that
yes.
he was
Mhm.
he was gay. Last couple things I want to talk about before we get into it is one. So I noticed when the movie came on, it's a Fox Searchlight movie, which I forgot, but Fox, bought by Disney, like with their history and like Walt Disney's like potentially closeted like anti-Semitism. Like I don't even know if they would
good
release
point.
this movie. You know what I mean? Like they're lucky it like got
Good
out
point.
before the merger.
You think that they wear that on their sleeves so much?
I think they would have like the controversy surrounding it. They are like Disney is at a point right now where they're so anti any controversy whatsoever, and especially something like
Tell
this.
me about it.
And the other thing I want to say is like this movie is only so good because, and there's like one main child actor and one side actor, but and Thomason McKenzie, but she's like 19, so I mean she's like. They're like just all so amazing in this. You know what I mean? And Roman Griffin Davis, who plays Jojo, like has to do so much comedy and then like the one scene that we're going to talk about. And he like plays it fucking perfectly. Like better than some like adult actors I've seen like cry.
Yeah. Yeah. I was mad. I really thought he should have gotten an Oscar nomination that year. I really do.
It's that kid from oh my god, what's that movie? He's like the youngest that ever won a
oh yeah, I forget.
You know which movie I'm talking about? Yeah. He's the only one that can win one in like it has to be like another 20-30 years before another small child can win an Oscar.
Small child can win. Even the kid who plays Yorkie though. Oh my god.
Yeah, oh my god, Yorkie is like my favorite character.
His delivery of everything is so like I envy that delivery for all the lines like "Ooh, Jojo, a girlfriend!" Like everything he says or between he's like I love his line. One of my favorite lines in the movie is and our only friends are the Japanese, but between you and me, they don't look very Aryan.
Right before that line, that's Yorkie's best scene. Like that whole like ending thing, that's his best scene because like right before that line, he's like, yeah, I think she's kind of my girlfriend, but she's a Jew, and Yorkie's like, I don't know, Jojo, we got bigger things to worry about.
He's like, there are worse things than Jews. Have you seen these Russians coming in? I hear they eat dogs.
Yeah. They eat dogs and they kill babies and eat dogs.
No, they eat babies and they have sex with dogs.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, we don't want the Russians to come here because they're gonna eat us and have sex with our pets. Okay.
Oh, it's so funny.
You know, it's one last little thing about him. So Archie Yates that plays Yorkie is so as a kid that grew up as a fat little kid. There's this scene right after, like in the beginning, where Jojo's running around Heil Hitlering everybody, and then he comes up to him and then comes up to Yorkie and he's like says hi, and then they start running off and you see Yorkie running, and I was like, I wonder how many times they made him do that scene, and like he's not keeping up, and I'd be like, Taika, can we fucking cut this shit out? Like we got this.
I thought you were gonna mention the scene where he's like, I thought I was your best friend, and he goes, well, look, unless you're the Third Reich hidden in a little fat boy's body, then I would take second place. And he's like, I guess I'm just a little boy hidden in a fat boy's body.
Yeah.
Or his line at the end. Sorry, the last one is when Jojo, when he sees him right at the end, and Jojo's like, "Oh, I thought you were dead." He's like, "It seems like I can never die." Because he does. He escapes so much in the movie. He escapes death like 2 or 3 times. He seems like I could never die.
We just saw Jojo almost get killed by the Russians with what's his name? So Sam Rockwell. So I mean, like when you see Yorkie after that, like holy shit, Yorkie made it.
Yeah, he made it.
We even see on his back that he has some sort of like blown burn or something.
Yeah.
And Rebel Wilson was sticking grenades to the back to the backs of the kids
was
and making
fun.
them run to the enemy.
That was
And
the
I was like,
darkest part of the movie.
That was the one scene where, like, I won't lie to you, that's the scene where it's funny. Don't get me wrong, it's funny. That might be the scene though where, like, if I was one of the producers, I would be like, Taika,
mm,
maybe I get it, it's funny, it's also really dark. What are you going for? I might make you take that out. She could keep the flamethrower and run into battle, but the giving kids grenades and letting them run, I would be like, yeah, Taika, that's where I might need to.
but you know what
a
though?
little bit.
You know what though? To paint Nazis as bad as they are, you need scenes like that to run home, because it's not like you're putting in a good character and having like an irredeemable act. You're putting someone who's also she's seconds away from dying herself. So it's like whatever, you know.
Great point.
Well, yeah, and I mean, and you have a character who's been funny for you the whole time, and so then you're at the end showing like, yeah, they're all evil. So let's get into it. It starts off with Hitler, and I think one thing, realizing it on these watches, Taika as Hitler is maybe the least important part of this movie, and probably like the part that was most controversial. But it's like it's all funny, and you kind of see like this deterioration between Taika and the little kid and Jojo. But it's like you cut that out of the movie, and it's basically the same movie, besides those funny parts.
Same movie. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah. Although I think he's such a great representation of Jojo's love and hate for the Nazi movement throughout, that every time he gets close to his mom, you see Hitler like steaming in the background, and then his complete dismissal of him at the very end. I think you're right. Like, we would have gotten that as an audience, but as a visual representation of his abandonment of the Nazi party, no better way is "fuck you, Hitler," and then kicks like curb stomps him out the window. You know,
priceless. The thing I really like too is kind of like you just touched on. Is it also shows the complexity in JoJo, and that a lot of those scenes, you're right. You could take those out and you have the same movie. At the same time, though, you keep those scenes in the movie, and that's really when you see JoJo battling with everything. And it is funny how their relationship and their both performances with each other progress as well. It also, there are some also great lines from Taika too, though. Like one of my favorite lines from him is where you think you're going in her mind or his mom, I want you to go the other way. Like it's that big. So, but I do think but it's also such a bold swing that I respect, because you could have, like you said, you could have made the movie without Taika playing Hitler, and he chose to really double down on it and do it. And I do think the movie, while you could have made a similar movie with it, I do think the movie is better for having it in there.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's still one of my favorite parts of the movie. It's still like, it has all of the comedy in it. I was just saying, like, from getting the point across of the movie, and yeah, as Alana already said, you need the "fuck off Hitler" at the end, just because it's funny.
Yeah.
So after this, I really love the. Once again, it's like I made the comment about that person saying, "Why are you laughing at it?" But him saying, like, as a little kid, yelling "Heil Hitler" to everyone as he's running with the Beatles, like, "Hold my hand." Like, I just like it. It is funny because you're painting like this very like picturesque, like, kid, like, sweet moment of him running, like, happiness as he's saying "Heil Hitler" to everyone he passes, probably saying it to people who are like, "Fuck Hitler." You know what I mean? Like, not everyone is happy that the Hitler is there. But and also right before that, you have the scene with him and when he starts the Heil Hitlering with Taika, and he's like, "Heil Hitler? Who's Hitler?" Like, just say it, like, throw it away. Just throw it away.
I love how much Taika Waititi doesn't look anything like Hitler, and that's even more like perceived because there's so many shots of him standing in front of the actual poster of Hitler in his room in the background, and it's just like, yeah, we know, but we don't care. And the blue contact lenses, oh my god, it's hilarious. And I'm pretty sure he wore some sort of like a little pudgy fat suit to just make I've never seen Taika Waititi shirtless, but I'm pretty sure he's just ripped as hell. That's how I imagine him.
Probably wiry. I'd guess wiry.
Wiry? Yeah, okay. All right, man, whatever. But yeah, to make him just like this fat try hard. You know, he Aryan race is like this perfect everything, blah 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 blah. So to make him like a little pudgy and a little like kind of dorky, I don't know, I just really that's when I don't understand what people are like, oh, they're paying homage too much to the Nazis. It's like every step of the way, from wardrobe to dialogue, is making fun of these people.
And I think on top of it, they also make fun of it's set that tone set by Jojo at the beginning where he's hiling everyone. That's like a consistent absurd thing he doubles down on, where like when they all walk in the room, they all have to heil.
Yeah.
And even if it takes, there's like the one scene where they all have to do it, and it takes like 2 to 3 minutes. Like it's hilarious. So, but that's the absurdity. Like they relied on that so much, or they had to do that symbol so much, and it's like it's ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. But to Jojo, he gets it to make sense. To the adults, to us as the viewers, it's this utterly ridiculous piece of formality.
Yeah. So, and then we get to Nazi Moonrise Kingdom, and it's like, it just looks so much like Moonrise Kingdom. And this part is just like, just pure comedy to then set up why Jojo's going to be at home for the rest of this movie. But like so many fucking lines. Well, like one of the ones, they're like 3, 2, 1 swastika, and then they get in the shape of a fucking swastika.
Yeah. And I don't know if you notice this, but when Hitler runs next to him and they jump over the barricade or log or whatever, he puts his arms up like a swastika. Like when he jumps and runs, he himself looks like a swastika. God, so funny.
And then they're like the burning of the books, and it's like all of these things they're doing that they just like they're at summer camp. And this is fun for them, and they don't realize like the evil they're participating in.
I don't think all of them are unaware. You have the few older boys who are like kill the rabbit, and I think those guys. And I what I love about the character arc of those guys is they're so excited to go to war until they are coming back from it, and I don't think that hits with Jojo until the very end too, is where the war is at his front doorstep. I think it hits to him earlier, right? I think it hits to him when he sees his mom. But I think the war itself, that he's like, oh, we're at war and we're so excited for it. And then he sees it firsthand, and that slow-mo camera going around him, and he's just terrified. That's like the full arc coming into place.
It also just shows once again the power of the fear and the propaganda, because like you're right, those boys are motivated. Those older ones are like, it's an honor, I'm gonna go to war and represent the fuel, like I'm gonna do all that. And then it literally, that arc comes full circle, and you see really what the price of war is. But the way they do it at that camp, and they really strategically brainwash these kids, they make them burn everything they learn, like they really fully try to immerse them in this. It just makes Jojo's arc and the story that they're trying to tell overall so much stronger, with the right amount of levity in it. Because then you'll get something funny from Yorkie, or when like he throws the grenade and it lands right by him, it's like shit, like and then it cuts to Rockwell going, "Don't do that."
Well, there's like some of the funniest stuff in this too. Like one right after he won't like kill the rabbit, and Hitler is like, dude, they used to say crazy stuff about me, like, look at that psycho, he's gonna get all of us killed. And he's like, come on. And I love the introduction of Rockwell too, by the way, like the shooting where he's just like,
can two-eyed people do this?
Or just like too, it's like the way he lets some of the dialogue be like modern, where he eats the apple and then he just throws and goes, "Heil Hitler, guys." Such like a casual, like a modern way of saying it, Hey guys.
His not casualty, but his casualness of everything is
eventually casualty.
Eventually. Yeah. It's like all through the movie, because you see him in his getup, and it's not as tight, like his vest, his jacket, and his belt and his shoes. It's not as tight as everyone else's. And then the next thing you see him, where he's teaching them how to throw the grenades, he has his vest open, his shirt open. It's very casual, very relaxed. So you can see that. I think it's another great line from Elsa where he's like, "Oh, so you've given up on your country?" And she's like, "They've given up on me first." And with Sam Rockwell, it's kind of the same thing where he lost the eye and they demoted him so much that he has this really, I really don't give a shit about being here kind of view, which works in our main character's favor at the end. So yeah, I like that cause and effect throughout the whole film.
Well, and I think to what you were just saying, when you first see Sam Rockwell and his opening lines are, I got injured, so now I'm not allowed to do what I'm trained to do, which is fight for the Fuhrer. You're thinking like, oh, he's dressed casually because he doesn't give a shit anymore because he doesn't get to go to war. And then as the movie plays on, you realize, no, he doesn't like agree with all of what they're doing. You know what I mean? He's like, when Jojo's like, oh, these are what Jews are like. He's like, no, they're not. And they're like, he's like, I wouldn't even know what a Jew looked like if they weren't wearing the funny hat. You know what I mean? He's just like, he doesn't buy into all the bullshit.
It's because when he was sent home after his eye accident, he had time to think, realize he's gay, and then realize that they're representing everything he's actually, or he's for. They're representing everything that he's against it.
He met Freddie Finkel.
He did. He met Freddie Finkel, but you both beautifully touched on where my brain went, and it was actually going to be something I asked, but you guys already started talking about it, so I just pick up on it. Is part of me also on rewatch, because I've seen this movie like 4 or 5 times since I first saw it in theaters. I also took it as two that he does have that frustration, or it appears he has that initial frustration and like screw it mentality. I can't do what I'm supposed to. I got demoted. But as the movie goes on, I interpret it as kind of like you just said, Alon, is he did it. He got there, saw the horrors of it all, and knows he can't necessarily leave or desert. So he is stuck doing this, and he almost is punishing himself, and he hates himself for it. And then at the end, he's actually able, not that he's, because David, I like that you brought this up earlier, like there's a fine line of making someone too sympathetic when they're not necessarily perfect. But I do think he's able to, he has a couple overt actions he's able to do to leave to do something right. And that's why I love the idea of, I hate when like villains or gray characters like that, sometimes when they get to live. So I do love that he did those things, but he still dies in the end, right? Like, so he's still, because of everything he did in his life, unfortunately, he's going to die. He's not perfect. He doesn't get that perfect ending, but he did do a few things right to be able to be at peace with it.
Well, and one thing I want to say is, whenever someone, it's the same Rockwell, it's the same argument with the other Rockwell role, 3 Billboards.
It's the same Rockwell.
It is the same Rockwell.
Same Rockwell argument that I don't really like. You portray a character how he is, and how you feel about it is how you feel about it. You know what I mean? If it garners sympathy from you, then that's what happened. You know what I mean? So like, if you just play him one note, like that's fine, right? But I mean, there were probably Nazis like this, right? You're not saying that like, you're not like saying that like, oh, they weren't all bad. You're saying there were people like this, and they still were Nazis. They're still bad people.
The only thing I can think of, because I like playing devil's advocate in this situation. In this situation, that people have a problem with his arc or redemption arc, I think it's hard to look at this movie and not see all the Nazis as satirical plays on what they are. And then, like, Rebel Wilson, 100% satirical, right? There's no deeper level character right on her than she's a Nazi. She's also a comedy piece in the film. When you try to add this deeper emotional involvement in a character that you in the beginning of the movie labeled as a satirical character, your brain is like, oh, this is coming out of left field. Where is this coming from? It almost feels tacked on. I don't feel that way, but I'm saying if you could feel that this is tacked on in a way, then you could say, oh, this comes out of nowhere, giving this very flat character an undeserved redemption arc. That's how I can see people having an issue with it. Not that everyone's a complex human being and no thought is just a one track thought, because in real life everyone is a complex human being and everyone has different thoughts happening at the same time. But because his character is played, or because all the Nazi characters are played so one note, giving one of them this deeper level might come off as like, I don't know what to do with this information.
Well, Jojo's also a Nazi, though. Although Elsa,
he's not really a Nazi. He's just a little boy who wants to be part of a club
and likes swastikas. So after he blows himself up, we finally get to meet Scarlett Johansson, which we're like 20, 25 minutes in. And as I said, this is just like a reason to get him home. But I love Scarlett Johansson, but two, I love her in this role. Like, we first meet her, and then she takes him to Sam Rockwell and just immediately knees him in the nuts and is like, you scarred my boy, now find him a job.
I'll be straight up with you. Her entrance in here is so fiery and it's so perfect. This is, as we talk more about her as it goes on, this is one of my favorite Scarlett Johansson roles. I think it's one of her best ones.
I agree.
In which it's funny, if with her double nomination that year, because she also was nominated for lead in Marriage Story as well. It's funny, if you made me, like, if there was a rule where like you had to like remove one of them, I would have kept this as her nomination and took out her one from Marriage Story. That's how effective, and she does a lot with the comedy, but the deeper stuff on her. She brings a lot of nuance and a lot of depth to this role. So just shout out to ScarJo for this role. That's kind of all I wanted to say there.
ScarJo, if you're listening,
shout out to ScarJo.
Shout out to you, yeah.
Shout out to you.
So what's funny too, because in Marriage Story, she has that one fiery scene where her and Adam Driver are like yelling back and forth at each other, and that's like the reel that gets her like the Oscar, the nomination at least. And so with this one, it's such, as you said, it's like nuance is a thing you throw out at so much when you talk about stuff like this, but she's playing a woman who is trying to put on this front for her son that everything's all right, but at the same time, her like world is terrible. She hasn't heard from her husband in years. She's fighting off the Nazis, and she's always putting on this brave face, and like the way she acts differently with Jojo versus Elsa, it's so perfectly done. And so yeah, I agree with you that this is like, I wish she had, like, this is the one I appreciated more.
I think a big problem with Oscar nominations, and I enjoy watching the Academy Awards for shit like that happened last year, but I do not think that they are perfect at all. I don't hold the Bible to it, but the focus on Best Actor, Best Actress awards, I feel like are too action. Like, they focus on like giving the nominations to people who are very animated in their roles and such things, and not so much reactive. And it's like that's I think that's even harder to do as a good actor is when you're being yelled at, or when you're taking in a line from a fellow actor, it's how you react to that line. And that depends on whether the editor, the camera, the director gives you enough screen time to show your reaction to it, obviously. But you can yell. Anyone can yell. David can yell. You can yell. I can yell. But the how we take it in, that is so nuanced and the way she does it in this movie. A scene I'm thinking of is when they're on the bridge, they're on the steps, and they have that conversation. And like David said, she has this front that, from her son, it slowly breaks down. Starts to break down when you see the hanged people, and he's like, what did they do? And she said,
what they could.
And but my favorite part is when they're walking back home before they get on their bikes. And, like when you're with your mom or dad, or when you're a little kid, you're the one who always wanted to walk up on the wall, and your parents walked on the ground, and she's the one walking up on the wall, and Jojo's walking on the ground. And it's just like that and it's not so much her, it's so much direction, but it's a great representation on like she has a mentality. It just represents her character so well that she has this kind of like playful mentality. And Jojo being 10 is already, he thinks he's so grown up, so he's going to take the more like adult way. But his mom brings that out of him. His mom always is able to bring out the child playfulness out of him. I think it's just a beautiful relationship they set up throughout the whole movie.
I just thought it was so he could memorize her shoes.
Well, that too. But you also see those shoes at the pool scene too. You know, those are always in the view.
So the next part of this, it's like really crazy how much he plays this like a horror movie when he discovers Elsa. Like the music to when he actually finds her and she starts chasing him. It's like The Ring when she comes out, right?
Her hand coming out of the cupboard. Yeah.
And then she goes up to him. She's like, "You know what I am. Say it." He's like, "Ghost." It's like, "No, Jew." Like, you idiot.
Like fucking Twilight, like Edward being like.
But I mean, everything from the music too, right? Like that is a pure like horror scene, and it's just like it's so interesting that he just like did that for that part of it, because it's like how Jojo would imagine finding a Jew, this thing that he's built up in his mind as this 10-year-old idiot, for it to actually happen to him. And I think it was just a pretty genius way to play it.
And shout out to Thomas and Mackenzie as well, who also, with what you just said, so Taika's direction of it all is fantastic. But then she nails the performance of it too. She comes out like she understood the assignment of, I have to introduce myself to Jojo like I'm his greatest fear, like I'm the scariest thing in the world to him. But then she's able to nail those couple moments of comedy, like you just said, where he's like, a ghost. It's like, no, Jew, like you idiot.
Another thing I didn't really think of until just now is that how long has she been in that house? How long has she been able to hear through the walls conversations between Jojo and Hitler and Jojo and his mom? Can you imagine like not knowing like who this 10-year-old boy is, and he's talking to this like seemingly grown man in his room every night, but it's just this one-way conversation. It's funny too, because when she is coming out to be this horrible monster to him, why is she coming at him like that? And it's like, partially it's because Rosie told her that her son is a devout Nazi and he's not gonna like this idea of her being Jewish and living in the walls. But also she's probably heard his like Nazi rants like for a while, however long she's been in there. So she knows how dedicated he is. What are you laughing at, David?
I just imagine in his sleep, he's just like, swastika. You know how in like grade school, like everyone drew those S's where you drew the 3 lines on your paper? I just imagine that they just drew swastikas like all day long.
Just everywhere. You're like in sand at the beach. You're carving it on trees with like I don't know what they, like with any food he was eating, like Twizzlers. You could do a super bad mashup where it's like Jonah Hill drawing swastika dicks, like yeah, just straight up everything.
My favorite line in that scene is when he goes to his room and it's like, she took your knife, and he's like, I know. And then Hitler's like, there could be hundreds of them living in the wall, and he does like a little look back.
Well, the funniest thing after that too is Jojo's like, what should I do? He's like, I don't know. What am I, an expert on Jews?
Well, also, doesn't he say like Jojo, like once again, it plays the stupidity of the Nazi party and Hitler's when, doesn't Jojo say like, she used her mind control powers? He's like, he like freaks out.
Well, yeah. Hitler knows everything that Jojo knows, no more, no less, right? And I think that's one of the beauty. That's another really awesome part about why you have to have imaginary Hitler in this movie, is because Jojo can be saying one thing, like one opposite position, and then Hitler is saying another thing, which is kind of like what is happening in the duality of his mind. He's being torn already, like, oh, maybe, you know, this, and then Hitler's like, nah, maybe this. And so it's already this like conversation that he's already having in his own head, and it's best represented this way.
I like too. He goes back with another knife, and she immediately takes it from him. And Hitler's like, "Now she has 2 knives." He's like, "I know."
Later
then
on,
when-
Rosie's like, "Where's all my fucking knives?"
Yeah, ScarJo's like, "Where are all the knives?" Well, and even funnier too, ScarJo takes a bath, and he's just standing outside with another knife, like to guard
No,
her.
it's like a switch. It's because Hitler says you can't give her any more knives, and he's like, "Yeah, I get it." So he gets another weapon. Like when he comes at her with no more knives, it's a ladle. Ah, man, it's great.
Well, and he's like, he sort of. This is like one of the most interesting parts of the movie to me, and I'm almost wondering like if it could have been written a little better, but like
You watch your damn mouth.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, this won the Oscar, so it couldn't have been written any better. But he knows about her, she knows about him, and I was like, it's not very well spelled out that the mom knows about her at first, and then like, does she like, what is Jojo supposed to know, and like it like the way the dynamic of is kind of interesting, but then of course like the next scene ScarJo is talking to Elsa, and so it's like it's spelled out for you, but like she's like, don't tell your mom or I'll cut your head. And it's like, well, wait, why? And it's just like, oh, because in the next scene she's like, if he finds out about you, because my 10-year-old's a Nazi, I'm gonna have to kick you out, like I'll have to choose him.
Which is a fun fact. The alternate title of this movie, My 10-Year-Old is a Nazi.
Well, there's the funny line. She's like, it took him 3 weeks to get over the fact that his grandfather wasn't blonde.
That's a funny line. I
Yeah.
forgot about that line till now. But you're right. I do think that's kind of a point that like does make your head turn a little bit when you're like, okay, why does this have to be such a secret? But it also shows the tragedy, and she doesn't necessarily know what her son will do, and she is fearful. And I think her playful nature of it too, it's indirectly her almost trying to save Jojo herself and bring him out of this Nazi thing, but she's afraid she can't and knows she probably can't. And that's the beauty of the fact that it's really Elsa who does it. The thing she was afraid of him to find for what he would do ends up being the thing that saves him. So there's so much there. That's why I said like this movie's so much. I've like talked to people who watch it and they're like, it's stupid. It was just dumb. It's just dumb humor. I'm like, it's so deep. Like,
Nico
so
Nico just turns to those people. He's like, oh, well, that's a shame. I can't be your friend anymore.
It's a shame because if you didn't see all that, I mean, there's so much in here.
Same as Ragnarok. The other thing too is
I'm not denying that. I just don't like it. I'm not denying that. I just don't like it.
you and my
I think
wife.
I think we're all unanimous with just Love and Thunder was just bad.
Oh God, yeah. I haven't finished it yet. I don't know what happened there. I think it's just too much comedy.
They should have just put more Christian Bale and less Valkyrie, and it would have been a better movie.
I'll be honest, he that's a movie where I think he got too many. He took away the wrong part of why people loved Ragnarok.
Yes,
because I'll admit Thor, outside of Black Adam, Thor: Love and Thunder is one of the worst aging movies of the year for me. But I will say this: Taika's great at emotion. The Jane stuff I think is really great, and even how it ends and the way that movie ends, I give him credit. I'm like that's a movie where the first half of that movie, when I saw it, I'm like, this might be the worst movie I've ever seen. And then by the time the movie was over, I had tears. And I'm like, well, he somehow got something out of me. So I can't quite say it's a total crapshoot, but it's. I think him and Feige were like, oh, just do the comedy. And he's like, okay, I'll just sprinkle in the villain.
Feige is turning out to be such an idiot, like a parent idiot to me. And so with Ragnarok, I always think of those as two movies. You have the Hulk and the Grandmaster stuff, and then you have the Hela and the Ragnarok stuff. And they're so separate in my mind that I sometimes forget that they're the same movie. And I think Ragnarok, I'm going to say it right, it is good because he mixes those two pretty well together, and they balance and they come well in the end. But the Hela stuff is the more powerful stuff, and the Hulk stuff is the more fun stuff. And I think exactly what you said, Nico, is that they were like, what? They got all the fans' reactions, and they were like, oh shit, people really like the Hulk stuff. And it's like, no, dude, like the emotion was in the hella stuff. And so when making Love and Thunder, they were like, we'll save a little bit of that to the end, but mostly fill it up with just fun shit. And then everyone was like, nah.
And I think he also like, and it's Feige too, don't get me wrong, but I also feel like of all the directors in Phase 4 and even 3, I believe the director whose personal touch is present the most in the MCU is Taika's. Like his movies, you're like, that's him. Like in other movies,
and
like,
guns.
Sorry, and gun. But like particularly in Phase 4, at least, like Taika's the movie between Coogler, between Zhao and Taika and Raimi. Like Taika's the one where you go, oh, that's his movie.
Raimi was strong. Raimi,
and I'm a Sam Raimi guy, and I actually love Doctor Strange too. Raimi's is pretty much all there. You can see, I think, some of the middle stuff with the Illuminati. I'm like, oh, that's when like that was more of like the studio saying like you have to do some of these things. But Taika, between Ragnarok and Love and Thunder, that you can tell like Feige's not touching any of that movie. Like Feige didn't touch a single thing. I also think Taika and Feige underestimated the audience again, like to where they're like that they don't even want the emotion. Like we can't even make it that deep because they're just going to sit there and laugh or not get it all. Whereas this movie is his perfect balance of the comedy and the emotion, in my opinion. Like this is his best made movie.
It's his best made movie.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's his best made movie. And of course, I mean, we're not going to have you on the podcast, Nico, without talking about some MCU comic book
you're going to have to.
geek stuff.
It's going to come up at some
point. It's going to come up at some point. So anyways, but yeah.
We're cutting all of it. One last thing I want to say is it is interesting too, like when you watch how she talks to Jojo versus Elsa. You mean the front Scarlett Johansson puts on with Jojo versus like the real adult talk she talks with Elsa, and like, you know, you're gonna grow up one day and like, oh, you have to fight them, and like and she says this line, it's harkening back way before the MCU talk started with you guys, but she's like, I know my little boy is in there somewhere. And that's like the point, is like that's why she's like keeping this from him, and that's why she's like still just loving him, is because she's like, she knows she can get him out of this, or at least she hopes. She's holding out hope because it's her son. And I think that is like part of the like the powerful like point of the movie, and then also just like Scarlett Johansson's performance. And then we get the swimming scene, which is just funny. And I love Rockwell's line of like, yeah, we have to train in case they ever have to fight, the Americans in a swimming pool.
Yeah. The subtlety of sprinkling the tragedy of this whole thing throughout the movie is great too, because you see people throughout the movie without legs, without arms, who are the tragedies of war. But then you have Hitler in the most ridiculous swimwear I've ever seen, swimming underwater. But it just melds so well together. And when Rebel is stretching him out, does it hurt so much because of his injuries, or is she like, would that hurt anyone that much as far as she was stretching him? I think it was mostly accelerated because of his injuries, right?
I think so.
I don't know.
David?
I didn't think about it at all. It's not a point I thought about. I did think it was funny that like, and this is just like a plot device where he goes to him. He's like, "What if I found a Jew?" And Sam Rockwell's like, "Oh well, you just tell us, and we tell the Gestapo, they tell the SS, and then they'd kill the Jew and the person who was hiding them, and probably a few other people just to be sure." That's just the way things
These are
going.
Paranoid times. These are paranoid times.
He's like, just and that like, because there's probably a point where he was writing this. He's like, oh wait, he can't tell the mom because she'll cut his head off. Why wouldn't he just tell other people? You know what I mean? It's like, and that's like a good way to do it. And then this is like the impetus for the book about Jews, because he's like, someone should, at this point, Jojo doesn't have a purpose. He's like kind of lost. He's like, how can I help the Fuhrer? And he's like, oh, someone needs to write a book about Jews. And he's like, oh shit, that could be me.
Rebel Wilson sitting on the other side of the bench and just kind of scoots her way over.
See, that's where his like over the top humor, sometimes like the other films doesn't work. It was so funny.
It's like my uncle was hypnotized by a Jew.
Yeah.
And
made him gamble, lose all his money.
Cheat on his wife.
And once again, the brainwash, like you just blame them. When in doubt, you blame them for for everything.
You catch that it was her uncle that made him cheat on his wife with her sister?
Right.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
So then we get the first like real meeting with Elsa, and I love like, I was saying how complicated it all is, and then he kind of explains it. He's like, "Well, I can't tell my mom, and you can't tell my mom, and I can't tell anyone else because they'll kill my mom." And he's like, "So it's a Mexican stalemate." And she's like, "It's just a regular stalemate."
Oh,
Yeah.
that line to the Mexicans and edges. Once again, just the delivery of Thomasin McKay. I thought that year she could have been nominated too because she does such a good job.
Yeah, she's like, what? He's like, tell me about the Jews. We're like you, but human. He's like, please take this seriously.
I mean, man, we could literally like spend the whole podcast just talking about every line in this movie and how hilarious it is, which is kind of what we are doing, but that's okay.
Well, and then along with the hilarious line, she has this one line where she's like, "We were chosen by God. You were chosen by a pathetic man who can't grow a full mustache," and it's like she is probably given like some of the most subtly funny lines, but then also just like the most cutting dialogue because she's like, "I've lost my fiance and my family, and you're just this fucking stupid 10-year-old who is talking to me about Nazis." And it's like, I don't have time like your mother does to like wipe your butt and like help you out. So I'm just gonna be real with you.
And she's also seeing the problem, right? She's seeing that like it's little kids like this, little boys like this, who buy into everything. They don't grow up. They don't give it any rational thought. They just go with it, and then they carry out these terrible, terrible acts with little to no understanding of the world at all. And so it's also amazing in her character and her performance how mature she is and how much like a veteran of the world she feels like, as she's spitting facts the whole movie, like you said, like she's dropping dimes here, and Jojo half the time has no clue even what she's saying.
Well, in a later part too, Scarjo's like, "Oh, you'll be a woman. You'll go to Casablanca and take multiple lovers and stare an tiger in the eyes." And she's like, "I don't feel like a woman." And it's like, but she does, right? To all of us watching her, it's like you're fucking lived long, more lives than the rest of us, like at least from a hardship perspective. And then she's like, "Did you do all that stuff you talked about?" She's like, "No. I never stared a tiger in the eyes," like instantly, like she had multiple lovers and all that.
I feel like that scene kind of softens the blow of her death later on a little bit because like she's lived her own life too. Like she's done all these things, and
she was a whore in Casablanca. Is that what you're saying, Alon?
You don't really live. You don't really live until you become a whore in Casablanca. Okay, David?
Well, that's my plan. Second life.
No, I just mean like she's lived a life and now she's fighting for this thing that she really believes in. And I think there's no more powerful point in the movie where she's like, if you live yesterday, today, and damn it, hopefully tomorrow, then they don't win. And as long as there's one, that they don't win. And I think that's just so powerful because she dies protecting her. And then it's tragic because very soon after she dies, the war is over, and she would have been okay if she could have held out a few more days. But it's awesome because the war is over, and if it wasn't for her, that girl Elsa would have died. And so it's like it's this really beautiful thing that even though Rosie died, she didn't really die because her plan to protect Elsa was followed through to the end. So
it's also really powerful for everything you just said. In addition, that there's a lot of heroes throughout history that we never know about. And while the history books aren't going to know about her, Jojo and Elsa will. And they get to say that, that they knew a hero and that she contributed more to, Jojo, she contributed more to humanity than, what the whole country did. Because what the whole country and what the Nazi Party was trying to say is they're trying to change the world, they're trying to do all this stuff. And it's such a lie, it's such a farce. And yet she actually does something overt with her life to It brings her line earlier full circle when the people are hanging and Jojo says, "What did they do?" And she says, "What they could." She did what she could, and her son and Elsa are alive because of it, and they're going to be better, and they're going to hopefully go to America or stay in Germany and get to live out a beautiful life.
They're gonna go and hang out in the smelly baguette, wine, cheese country of Paris.
Oh yeah.
Do you think when JoJo like turns 18, she's gonna be like, "All right, let's give this a shot, Joe"? Joseph. She calls him Joseph now.
She calls him Joseph now. I think his name was never Joseph. I think his name was Johannesson, I think.
Yeah, but now it's Joseph in Paris.
he changes his German heritage. Yeah.
Joseph and Paris.
He's probably not as proud of it anymore, honestly. I also don't think anything could have softened the blow of ScarJo's death, Alon, but that's just...
It was, I think the reveal of her shoes is so beautifully done, because I think Nico said it earlier, where he's just distracted by all this stuff like a little kid would be, and not really taking the full, the accounts of everything happening. And that's really well visually shown by the butterfly. And he's just so enamored by this butterfly. First, it's the posters he's trying to like stick to the wall. And then he focuses on the butterfly and he follows the butterfly. And then when he lands on his mom's shoes, it's like everything starts coming in.
Yeah, we're not at that part yet, but yeah, it was very well done.
David hates it when I jump around. I love jumping around.
You just like, no,
sorry, David.
No,
it's similar me and
like,
Alon. I'm so sorry, David.
What Alon likes to do is like, he's like, oh, you know what? Everyone wants to talk about like this one scene. So what I'm going to do is talk about it an hour and a half before in the movie so I can get to it. And then when we get to it later, I'm just like, yeah, so the butterfly thing, Alon kind of covered that. So let's just fucking move on. But yeah, it was great. Obviously it was great. It's the most poignant part of the movie.
Was it?
Back to the dinner scene with Scarlett Johansson. We already talked about the food part of it, but I love when he's like giving her shit because she's hiding a Jew in the house, but he won't really tell her why. And then she's like, "Oh, you want your father?" And then puts the stuff on and slams her fist. Is like, "Don't fucking talk to your mother like that."
There was one F-bomb in the entire movie, and we have quoted multiple.
But about that scene too, as fun as it is, it's so scary and real. Like, because once again, her performance is so strong because she breaks that front, like she breaks the front for the first time, and she brings back whatever it was that his father was to them. And that's like the first time when she tries to get something through to him, and you see her realize it, and then she goes back to herself right away, and realize she has to bring him back by kind of playing around in a playful way again, but like using his father's voice and everything, and like still staying in character. So she's doing so much in that scene, which is like, if people ever questioned Scarlett Johansson as an actress, like you really look at this film and even this scene and be like, she does so many different things in that scene that are so awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another thing I just want to say quickly about that scene is he was going to eat her piece of bread that she was saving for Elsa, and I didn't really, I don't even know if this is like relevant, but I, on my second watch, noticed that the whole theatrics with the father, the ash on her face, and the dancing distracted him from eating her piece of bread. And so I'd like to also think that she did all that to ease him out of eating the food, and then she was able to give the food to Elsa.
I like that.
Well, that lessens the impact of the next part where she dances with him, because I was like, oh, that's such a sweet little moment. And then it's really sweet, and then it cuts to Elsa just by herself as the music is playing, and I was like, oh, that's fucking sad. Like, it just shows you, like you said, like hidden in the walls is like the sadness that you don't see as Scarlett Johansson's like trying to keep everything afloat, basically.
I have something to say that happens at the end of the film, but for your sake, David, I will withhold it until the end. Are you happy?
Yeah, Yeah, keep it to your fucking self. So next we get this second talk with Elsa where it's like draw a picture of where the Queen Jew lays her eggs and like
In your
and
head.
what's funny is Jojo doesn't even realize that he's falling for Elsa yet.
Yep.
And so he finds out about her fiance and immediately goes to the library and writes a letter about how, oh, Nathan, I've gotten fat and I found someone else and I don't love you. And it makes her extremely sad because Nathan's dead and we don't know that yet. And Jojo is so like, ah, shit, is that he immediately writes a second letter. He's like, oh, found a second letter. Don't kill yourself because I need you. And yeah, I'll still marry you, but I am fat, just to let you know. But so I'll see you.
It's just that like naive thing too of like his brain is not developed to where he understands like consequence or anything. So like, yeah, he finds a letter and then he's like, oh, now I have to fix it. I'll just act like I found another letter, as if like that's how quickly like mail works. Like he's able, oh look, I just have the second one here, and she clearly knows that the whole movie, and what we don't know is what she pays off with at the end. But I think that's the first moment too where she sees he is good in there, like Rosie's son is in there. And then that because he was willing to, obviously he wrote that she knows the truth, he doesn't, but then the fact that he tried to repair it so fast, she learns, wow, wait, he cares about me to an extent.
Yeah, she's like, oh my God, he did this thing to make me happy. And it's like, because of that, like hate him a little less.
I think I didn't really think of it as a way that Elsa looks at Jojo as her enemy. And I think it's because we watch movies a lot, right? So we know this arc is coming. We know like, there's some like unsaid rules of film that when you watch something, the titular character isn't going to be bad. Like that, he's not going to run to the Gestapo and rat out his mom and get everyone killed. Yes, Jojo has to be on Elsa's side by the end of the movie, obviously. But I don't think something that occurs to me, at least, is that Elsa needs to be on Jojo's side at the end of the movie.
Great point.
And when we watch movies, we already expect this to happen. So it's like, oh, we know Jojo doesn't really pose a threat. Elsa doesn't know that Jojo doesn't really pose a threat. So she has to be convinced that he's good. So that's why she's being told by Rosie that he's good. That's why all these scenes are happening, because Elsa has to be comfortable with him enough that at the end, when she walks out through that door, she has to know, because he says it's okay, extremely dangerous, but okay, that we as the audience have to be convinced why she's convinced to do that. And I think that all these scenes with the Nathan letters is the work that builds up to that.
Well, I also think in order for us to like Jojo, we need her to like him, right? Like it's like a litmus test for us that he's like won over this person. But I mean, also we always, I don't know, even as he's spouting nonsense for like, we almost can see the sweet little boy in there too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We also aren't idiots, so we know that like 10-year-old boys can't be like they're 10 and we've been told throughout the whole movie that he's just infatuated with the idea, but he doesn't understand the consequence. Like if this main character was 20 years old, it'd be a much harder sell for the audience. But yeah, exactly.
So next we get to the scene at the bridge with ScarJo, which is all overall just like a sweet scene. He's talking to her about love, and she's like, yeah, other people keep talking about that too. And she's like, what other people? And he's like, oh shit. He's like, oh, just other people, just random people. I love the line of, she's like, love is the strongest thing ever. He's like, no, it's metal, then dynamite, followed by muscles. It's such a fucking dumb bitch thing.
You stupid idiot. Yeah.
He has so many lines where he's so sure of himself. Like he's like, I know the penis thing is true. Rabbis wear them as earplugs. Like is later on.
The shoe tying and how that's a theme throughout the whole movie is beautiful, is great. I fully even watching it a second time, like 6 days later, I thought that he properly tied her shoes while she was hanging. And when he doesn't, I was like, oh, okay. It makes so much like beautiful. It's just like a beautiful way to literally put a bow at the end of the movie where he ties Elsa's shoes before she walks out, and he's successful at it. That whole theme leading up to it. And so at the bridge where she ties his shoes together, I think that's just like say what you want about Taika, but he does a really good job in putting the thematic elements throughout the movie at a consistent basis, so that when it does pay off in the end, fucking pays off in the end.
Are you guys one loop or two loops when you tie your shoes? How do you guys do it?
I'm one.
I
do the one loop, and
One
then you
loop.
pull it through. But then I'll double knot, where then I'll do the loop thing after.
Oh, you're saying like make the 2 bunny ears first and then put them through each other?
Yeah.
No, I'm a one loop guy. Yeah.
I'm a
See-
one loop guy first, but when I do the double knot is when
You're
I
a
do the
2 loop guy?
I'm a
David?
2 loop guy. That's how I
You're
learned.
two-loop?
Oh my god.
That's wild.
I know I'm a fucking little kid. I get
Somehow,
it.
yeah, somehow that makes you weaker and not as
What you want to know? What's funny about that though is it becomes such a like a classically conditioned motor thing in you,
Right.
where like I could tie my shoes so fast. If you make me do it how David does it, it'll take me, like, I'll struggle. I'll be
Yeah.
like, wait, then I gotta do that, because it's such a pattern that when I have to break my pattern, I'm like, wait, 1 and 2, and shit, it's not tight enough. Okay, 1, 2.
Well, I
And
will
there we
say
go.
the two bunny ears, you cannot get it as tight as probably the loops. Like, I've always known that, but I've never done the work to correct it.
That's how I am with phone numbers. Like my old, I can still remember like my childhood home phone number, my best friend from middle school's phone number. And it's not that I memorized the phone number. I memorized the way I move my thumb across the screen.
That's cool. Yeah.
And so for like phones that are like different than like the flip phones, it took me a while to get that movement again, because I was like, I don't know this dude's number. 879, what, I don't know it. I just hold the phone and I let my fingers go, and it's the right number.
That's wild.
But
Like an
yeah,
idiot savant.
you throw a bunch of toothpicks on the ground. And it's
How many are in that box? And then we talked about seeing the battered soldiers coming home, and she's like, tell your mamas you love them. Like, go home and hug your mamas. Is great. And then we get the next scene with Elsa, and she's like almost like trying to help him write the book now, because she's like, kind of developed this like affection for him. Later on, she makes clear as brotherly. And there's this one point where she's like, we can read each other's minds. And he's like, can you read German minds? Because he's like, oh shit, I don't want you to know what I think. And she's like, no, just each other's.
Yeah, Germans are much too thick to penetrate. And his little relief face that he makes.
Oh my God.
Yeah. What's funny, there's like, also right after this, there's like a funny Hitler scene where he starts freaking out on him because he's like, you're spending so much time with her. And he's like, this is what you told me to do. He's like, oh yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. Did I make this weird? Like, I didn't mean to make it weird.
It's funny that they paint him in that scene as like an insecure partner.
Yeah.
Right? As like it's like, well, you've been spending a lot of time there. It's like, are you cheating on me with Elsa? Like, it's so funny. And like in that aspect, like Taika is just able to perform there. Like, it's so perfect. And just his body language and everything.
Yeah. And then there's a couple like cool little bits after this before we get the next scene with Elsa, where he goes to Sam Rockwell's character, and it's so funny. Sam Rockwell starts yelling at Finkel. He's like, I wanted dogs, not German shepherds. And it's the most like classical like misdirection joke of the movie, where you then turn and it's like German men dressed as shepherds. Yeah, like I love that he like stuck that in there. And then
my wife watched this with me last night, and she turns to me at that scene and she goes, "That's it. That's the joke. German shepherds."
And you're like, yes.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I know you wanted to laugh.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and that's right after that we get him and Freddie. Like he's like, "I'm sorry, Freddie. I shouldn't have yelled at you. You know how important you are to me." And we get this like moment between them.
That's the one I was talking about. Where like he like looks at his mouth real quick and it's like, and like inhales and then they have to quickly break. It's so perfect.
Oh my god. And so this all leads to like more like Elsa liking Jojo by him stealing the colored pencils, but we don't get introduced to the colored pencils until Sam Rockwell shows him like the new design uniform that he's been designing, and it's the most flamboyant like stuff. And he makes up excuses for all of it. He's like, and the feathers are to show our fast movements, and then the music is to distract the enemy. And I was like, yeah, that's a totally straight thing to wear. And
I love the touch at the end of him actually wearing that uniform, like and dying in it.
Perfect, yeah.
With the eyeliner and the mascara and everything, yeah.
So he goes out to collect metal in this suit, and he first sees his mom passing out like resistance material. And this is, I think, that's the last point we ever see Scarlett Johansson is like from behind, which is not a bad way to see Scarlett Johansson.
It's from her son's perspective, you sicko.
I ain't her son, baby. And then he runs into Yorkie and he's like, this feels like paper. He's like, yeah, it's actually just paper-like. It's from our top scientists.
I think that is a true thing that happened at the end of the war is they wore this thing. And I think the only problem is that it's very flammable. And so they all caught on fire. Yeah.
And so right after he goes to Elsa, and this is probably like one of the sweetest scenes with Elsa, because he's like, I'm never going to be kissed. And she's like, I could kiss you. And he's like, you could tell in his head, he's like, oh my God, what do I do? But he's like, no, it would just be a pity kiss.
I love how he doubles down on it and he stands up and he's like, listen, let's get two things straight, okay?
One, I'm a Nazi and you're a Jew. And she's like, you're not a Nazi, you're a 10-year-old that likes uniforms and wants to be in a club. And then there's like this point where she turns it and looks in the mirror. She's like, I'm a dirty Jew. And he like immediately is like, oh, well, it's like, you should take a bath. Like, what have I been doing here? And like, it's like this sweet moment where he's like, he's like caring about her and not like stay in this room and don't cause any trouble.
Stay in your fucking lane. No, but then we get the butterflies in the stomach.
And she actually, she's staring at the wall at a painting and there's two tigers on it. And she like stares it in the eye. And I thought it was a cool little touch.
It's interesting where he's looking at her, looking at the tiger, looking at him. And but the perspective never like changes on that. So it goes from him cut to the tiger. And it's like he's looking at the tiger, and then it cuts to her looking at the tiger. And I that kind of flip of perspective was, I'm trying to be like really deep and like cinema aware, but I don't know what it was trying to represent. I just know it's cool and I liked it.
I take it as she. I think it's a really subtle, and we kind of have to, I think like earlier you said you can interpret certain things how you want, even if you're the only one doing it. I do think that's the beauty of art. I think she sees that and is like, no, Rosie actually has looked at Tiger. Like it's possible. Is everything she said actually possible for me? Do you know what I mean? Like, she has looked Tiger in the eye. There's a tiger right here. And I think what she says is possible for me. And I see her son change. Like, I think that's why you put it in there. It's almost like a nod to what Rosie said, but also if I'm Elsa, just not, of course, we'll never know what her character thought explicitly, but I took it as she's like, no, she has looked at Tiger in the eye.
That's also like way smarter than anything Alana or I have said tonight too. So
stop.
Very well done.
Stop.
No, it's very well done.
Just make me feel very little over here.
It was first the Ragnarok thing, and now this. I'm on David's shit list all of a sudden. I'm never going to get invited back.
No, honestly, you just make us better. So yeah, you'll be back.
Also, David doesn't make the decisions. Who's gotten the majority of the guests, huh? Who's gotten the majority of the guests? Anyway, and that's really poignant too, because you have this whole thing where, and it starts with that conversation. She says she's dirty. She takes a bath. They stare at the tiger. She does her hair. They listen to a vinyl, or she's either just going through his vinyls, and this is he's really opening up. They're really opening up to each other, and you have this really like this big moment where they're almost playing house together in this, right? They're outside of from just being in the upstairs area. They're downstairs and they're comfortable. And then boom, the Gestapo arrive.
Yeah,
and
so when
we got to get back to the plot.
And so what's funny is when I was like, I made like a little outline and sent it to you. When I had this in my notes, I had it as the Heil Hitler scene, but I was like, I'm not sending that via Google, writing Hitler in an email.
Put on a watch list. You have to put on a watch list real fast.
So it was the Elsa becomes Ing scene. But like we already talked about this, it's one of the funniest scenes. It's like showing the bureaucracy and like stupidity of this, and also you get to see like, I mean, there's the one point where Elsa has to say Heil Hitler, and you know the pause, and she's like, "Am I actually going to do this?" And she's like, "I fucking have to do this." And you know the way that Sam Rockwell does it too. So there is like some nuance into it, and like you get something out of the characters as they're forced to do this bullshit that they always have to do. But it's also just funny.
Yeah, the ridiculousness of it and everything like that. You notice too, like the Gestapo is surprised that Sam Rockwell is there, and he's like, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, "Oh, because he must have known that I was going to call them the rabbits, Jojo's family, is going to be checked upon the Gestapo, and he comes."
I think it's because Scarlett Johansson's probably already dead.
Yeah,
that you think so?
Or I think she's either caught or dead, and he needed to see if Jojo was also caught or dead.
But then doesn't tell Jojo about it at all.
Yeah,
dude, how do you break the news? I mean, I don't even. The thing is though, is that oh man, it just comes full head at the end. But the fact that he even shows up at the house anyways is just the beginning of hinting of his redemption arc, kind of just checking up on the family, and then covering for Elsa is another huge thing that happens.
You may have heard that Hitler has one ball, but that is a lie. He has 4.
Why do you think, like, I guess they're doing such a thorough check upon the house that they would have eventually come and discovered the cupboard, so she might as well have she's cleaned up now, so she's might as well has just presented herself.
I think that's the thought, is she was like, I'm gonna get caught, so don't get caught. This is like my best option. What's funny is then like afterwards she kind of like she hides back in the cupboard because she's like, I got the date wrong, I got too comfortable, and like I fucked up, and now it's like I need to go back into my hole. And Jojo comes in there and he's like, what, you can be my sister? And she's like, we're friends, we can be friends. He's like, you're a Nazi, I'm a Jew, we can't be friends. She's like done a 180 where she's like, no, this is, you know, I'm not, this can't happen.
And then that's the last time. No, it's not. I'm sorry. I was going to say that's the last time we see her until the end. But after this is where he sees the butterfly and then sees his mom. And I cried like a fucking little baby.
I remember when I saw this in theaters, and then with everyone else I watch it with, like, there's some times where I like watching movies I love with people.
Yeah.
And not that I'm staring at them the whole time, but for certain moments I go like, I want to feel their reaction or see their reaction or something, even if we just talk about it after the movie. This in theaters, there's a good amount of people in there, like, you felt the air get sucked, and there's a different level of silence all of a sudden. But then each time I've watched it with someone, like, I don't even look at them, I just hear like and even when it's not overt, like it's not that loud, I'm like, I feel like I just felt everything get sucked out. It's such a heartbreaking but well done scene, and I love it so much because I'm big. It's going to sound strange, but I've always been fascinated with like the symbolism of certain things, and a butterfly is one of them. Mm. And I love his choice and he might not have, once again, I might be overshooting myself here, but like, I know butterflies do symbolize change and transformation and stuff, but they also symbolize like hope and comfort and positivity. And I think the butterfly landing on her was trying to sum up everything she was. and everything
Yeah.
she tried to be, which was the change and everything. She tried to be comfort for her son, but then that's the minute where Jojo really changes too. And
Don't know if you noticed, but the butterfly was blue,
yeah,
and she was wearing blue.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it was his mom.
I think I could
Yeah.
see it that way.
Yeah.
His acting was
Oof.
so great in that
Yeah.
scene too. Like that is, he's doing all the comedy before, as I said, and then just that is so perfectly done. Like he
His-
should have gotten nominated for this.
I agree with you.
Other members of his family is in the movie. Fun fact.
Oh, really?
His twin brothers are Rebel Wilson's 8 kids, and they just copied them 4 times.
Are you serious?
Oh
wow.
Yeah, you remember all those little blonde kids? Those are Roman's actual twin brothers that are copied 4 times.
That's his. I didn't know that. Oh, that's wild.
Yeah, it's a good scene.
Did you know that, David? Did you know that?
No, no. I failed to mention earlier when they were talking about the girls at the summer camp. They're like, you guys are going to learn skills like knitting and how to make babies.
Oh my God!
I have 18 children.
The scene where Jojo just runs up and stabs Elsa is heartbreaking. What's interesting too is that the first time I watched it, the Scarlet Joe death scene came out of fucking left field for me. That I didn't cry at all. I just stood there in like shock and horror.
Oh, absolutely.
And the second time I watched it, I bawled even before he even saw the butterfly. I started tearing up because I knew what was coming. And then I was like slowly getting over it. I was like, you idiot. I know it was coming. Stop it. But when he stabs Elsa, the first time I watched it, that's when I began to really tear up because he just puts all of his hate and anger to her. It's like all that they were working on is just gone in that moment, only to be brought back when Germany is under attack. And I think that's beautiful too. It reminds me of that scene in Casablanca, and I mention it because David and I just did it.
That's right.
Is when Rick is in that flashback scene. Oh shit, what's her name, David? The love interest?
Ilsa.
See? So Rick and Ilsa are in Paris, and they're like in like a restaurant, and they're looking out the window as Paris is being invaded, and it's like the shot of their 2 heads looking out the window as like the shit happens out back, and it's like the shot of the back of the head, which in Jojo it's the shot of Jojo and Elsa looking at Germany being invaded by the Allies. And it helps watching movies back to back in that sort of way, but I made the instant connection that I felt like that's what Taika was kind of paying homage to, was Casablanca in that moment.
Well, they're going to Casablanca and having 2 lovers.
She didn't say Casablanca. She said Morocco, but I didn't correct you because I'm not an ass. So,
do you happen to know which country Casablanca's in?
No, I know, but she didn't say Casablanca. She said Morocco.
Okay, but you're aware though, right? I just
I'm
want to be
aware.
clear.
Yeah, you're very clear. I get it.
Maybe he didn't want to spell it out because he didn't want idiots, to figure it out. So I had to tell you about it. And he obviously tries to stab Elsa because he like blames her, but it's like this like quick moment of like anger, and then he can barely even stab because 1, he's like a weak little kid, and then 2, like his heart isn't into it.
I also think that knife is a piece of shit, and I think them building up like the Nazis building up how awesome and like needed that knife is throughout the whole movie for it to like barely go into someone. Maybe he's with straining, but I think it also calls to the fact that they build up a bunch of their shit that is just dumb, like that knife. That's how I took it too.
When I was so I used to do this, had this job where I would go appear in court and like just for random hearings. And so I went to this, I had like an hour drive, and I got there way earlier than I thought. And so I went into like an antique shop, and I was walking around, and there was this display case with like World War II stuff. and there was a Hitler Youth dagger in there. And I was like,
Wow.
oh, that's interesting. I was like, that's kind of a weird thing to own, though. Like, I like history. I like World War II history. It's like, I don't know, but how do you explain to people? How do you explain to people
why you have a Hitler
Yeah, why
Youth
you
dagger?
have a Hitler Youth
right?
dagger.
So
Because no good explanation would have been like, oh, it was passed down from me in the family. No, that's bad. And then the other one is, oh, I went out of my way to buy it. Also not a good explanation.
So I then go to the court hearing, and I'm sitting next to this older guy who's an attorney. And this other guy comes up before the judge, and he's like, hey, we need extra time because, as you know, I'm filling in for this other attorney who, who's passed away. And the judge is like, oh, okay. And then this old guy next to me turns to me, he's like, yeah, when they searched that guy's house, they found memorabilia in his house. Nazi memorabilia. I was like, okay, yeah, there is no explanation. There's no explaining. It just looks bad.
It looks bad.
Anyway, so we get like a montage of the war entering. There's the funny scene with Yorkie where he's holding the fucking missile. He's like, oh, hi, Jojo. And it fucking blows the door.
Oh, my God.
There is one line here, and like, it's coming from a kid. So it's like, if you are trying to nitpick this movie, like that sort of cuts your nitpick. But he's like, it turns out Hitler hid a lot of things from us. And that is sort of like, if you had that from like a Sam Rockwell, it's like, oh, he hid a lot from us. It's like, you're defending Nazis, right? Like, oh, I didn't know, you know what I mean? But like, I think coming from Yorkie, it's like, turns out he was actually kind of a bad guy. And then I love too where he's like, yeah, Hitler killed himself, and then the next time we see Hitler, there's like a bullet hole through his head.
That once again, Taika's attention to detail.
I didn't catch that. I caught that he was pretty beat up, but I didn't catch the bullet hole.
With characters and stuff in the plot, his attention to detail in this movie is awesome.
Yeah, and then one other cool thing, which I read it, and then when I watched it the second time this week, I was like, oh, that is in there. And I think it's purposeful because one, like timing of this, Taika had already done Ragnarok and then was still in the MCU. But there's this one point where Jojo hides, and then you hear this guy like go, come on. And then another guy goes, we're behind you, Cap. And then it was actually in the subtitles too, and like someone was like, oh, that's like Captain America. And if you listen to the come on guys, it fucking sounds like, not like Chris, it sounds like someone doing like a Captain America like impression almost. So I thought that was like a nice little detail. And then this is when Jojo gets captured for when I was watching it this first time, like this week, I was like, I remembered it lasting a lot longer and seeing more harrowing, but he gets captured, and then like Sam Rockwell immediately like saves his ass.
Yeah.
That's the scene I cried both times I watched it.
Oh, every time. Oh, it's a fantastic scene. It's amazing.
You cried because a Nazi was killed, Alon? Wow.
You know what, man? You can twist it any way you want, but the fact is that he does it with such he just threw it away, man. He just threw it away. But he did it with such he knew he was gonna die. He knows that the Nazi 10-year-olds aren't really Nazis. Like, know he knows that, and he knows that they don't deserve to die, but he doesn't know that the Americans know that, right? So he does it in the smoothest way. He takes off that hair, hat. He's like, look at you, let's get you all fixed up. And then in one swift movement, he just pulls off the jacket and throws him down the ground. And I'm tearing up talking about it because, God damn it, it's so fucking well done.
Well, he knows, right? He knows that's the way he's going to save him. Is by almost like, who knows? He might have been that they might have kept him alive because he had officer status, but he knew like he had to go full Nazi, and really push this kid away to get himself killed to save him, because it distracted one set of soldiers, right?
Full Nazi.
And who knows? It was just the other soldier was like, oh, let's just like let this kid go then, because the ones who capture him saw the jacket on him.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So like he had to really sell it. And what's sad too is Jojo's emotion, saying no, like, and if I was one of the soldiers too, I'd be like, why is he doing this? But it's he was just a kid, so there's a lot of emotion in that scene.
We know why he's doing it, because he looks at him as his friend. It's his friend.
Yeah.
And I love the first, when he throws him on the ground and he spits at him and he's like, "Get this damn Jew off me." And Jojo looks at him like, "What?" I'm like confused. And then when he gets it, it's this horrified look, because he understands everything now. And I think David said it earlier, is that this fucking little kid just plays the hell out of emotion. Like, he can go from confused to horrified, and we buy it. We buy it like that, and it's great.
Well, the other thing I want to say too is, like, Sam Rockwell's character is like knows he deserves to die, right?
Yeah,
Even though he
right.
like, when he's like, your mom's a good person, like an actual good person, he's like, he's fine with dying, because he's like, I've been a part of this horrible thing. And it's like, I deserve this. So it's like, he doesn't even fight. He's like, he tells Jojo, he's like, "Don't go, Jojo. It'll be fine." And it's like, yeah, I mean, that's like, of the moments, and this is probably like the second like saddest moment. And then we get up with Yorkie. Yorkie's always there to make us feel better. And he's like,
Seems like I can never die.
It's a really bad time to be a Nazi.
It's my favorite.
A callback to that line where he's like, "It's a really bad time to be a Nazi," was way earlier in the beginning, in the first act, as we call it, where Rebel Wilson is like, it's a wonderful time to be a woman. The walk to his front door and like realize, because Yorkie's like, "Oh, that means your girlfriend can, go now," and it's his realization that she now has no reason to stay with him, and it's his lie and everything like that. It's just it's exactly what a 10-year-old would kind of make up in his head. It's staying true to the character, which is more powerful that way.
It is true, but I also think it's kind of a weird thing to do, like right at the end of the movie, to lie and then 2 minutes later fix your lie.
Did he fix it because he drop kicked Hitler out the window? Is that
no? He
that
fixed it because
turnaround?
he fixed it because he's like, "We're gonna escape," and then takes her outside, and she obviously realizes like that he tells her that Germany's won the war, and then takes her outside, and it's obvious that Germany has lost the war.
Is it obvious because of the American flags flying around?
Yes, that's why it's obvious.
When I'm confusing my timeline, when does he drop kick Hitler out the window?
In between lying to her and then taking her outside. There's like one
Okay.
last moment where he's like, "Hey, Hitler comes to him and he's like," and this is where Hitler's got his head's blown. He's like, "Oh, we need to do this," and she's like, "You need to come with me and put on this Nazi thing." He's like, "Fuck off, Hitler," and kicks him.
That's right. And then that's his turnaround. He goes back, and the callback to how is it dangerous extremely thing, tying the shoe. Yeah.
One thing too that's I think, and I want to make sure I have this right. That's why I'm so glad it won the Oscar for adapted screenplay when I found this out. Because the writing of this movie is so strong. I forget it's if he combined two books. I know it said it's based off one book, but I think he combined something in a second book. And the original, if I have this right, or I might be, I've read this somewhere, but I'm pretty sure in the original material, the book is so much darker. And I actually think the movie ends where he lies to Elsa because he needs to keep her there. And then that's how it ends. It has like this really weird dark ending because
Well, way to fuck my
Elsa.
day up, man.
And that's why I think his biggest change was that's why Taika made that change at the end is he's going to lead her to freedom. I think, because there's another book, I think it's called, it's something Skies or Cage in the Sky or something.
So
Caging Skies.
I have it here. Jojo Rabbit is based on the novel Caging Skies by Christine Lunan.
Caging Skies.
And
Are you
apparently-
fucking reading Wikipedia again?
No, it's not Wikipedia, but I am reading the internet. But it apparently is saying that the movie was only adapted by Caging Skies. Like that was
there's not
the
a
only,
second piece
there's not
of
a
text.
second
Okay.
book. The fun thing is that all the main characters of the film are present in the book, like verbatim. except for Imaginary Hitler, that was Taika Waititi's only
Yeah.
add-in.
Okay.
That was not in the book at all.
Is the ending the same though?
I don't know. That's
Okay,
not in
because
my
I'm
thing.
pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the original ending it's much darker because the German literature is always like very dark because I think it's a German book.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure the original ending in the book it ends where he lies to her so that she stays with him, and that's kind of how it ends. But I love what the film does because it's beautiful. And then playing "Heroes" by David Bowie, which is one of my favorite songs ever. It's such
It's not by
cute
David
situation.
Bowie. It's by German David Bowie.
Well, yeah, German in this sense, German David Bowie. But I love too his direction. Once again, it comes full circle. When she's free, she wants to dance, and she doesn't say she's free. He goes, "What are you going to do?" And she knows she's free, so she just starts dancing, and they both dance. And it's such a cute, innocent, beautiful scene. First, she has to smack him because he lied.
Probably deserve that.
He took it well though.
Probably
He
he
took
did.
it.
He took it well.
Took it well.
He took it well.
One thing I don't know if you guys noticed, but all the way up till the last act of the movie, the town where they are is like really, really beautiful. It's like these really bright color buildings and everything like that. And there's only one scene before the end where the whole town is depicted gray, is where he finds his mom hung.
Mm-hmm.
Even after that, the town is again really bright and beautiful in all these colors.
Yeah.
As the mortars and the missiles and the bullets hit the buildings, all this gray appears, and it's the concrete that's being hidden under all the paint and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What's really cool is that at the end of the movie where she walks out of the house, the entire town is back to being colorful again.
Yeah.
It's almost like it. I don't want to say that it's depicting like almost like the war never happened, but it's just the representation of all this gray and dark and gloom and doom and just being, and then when they walk out of the house, boom, all the destruction is just gone.
Yeah.
It was hope, right? It's representing hope that they both have now. I wonder what happened to the dad. You know, maybe he might have showed back up. I kind of wish they had like a famous person be the photo of the dad. So you're like, oh man, like fucking Ryan Reynolds is going to show up any day and everything will be all right.
It's like Josh Brolin. It's like Mark Ruffalo. It's like someone really distracting.
Yeah.
Ryan Reynolds is a great one. Because he has some wild. Ryan Reynolds has some wild cameos. Like in Ted, he's like the secret lover of the guy, and he doesn't have dialogue. He just shows up and smiles.
Oh, there was a movie recently that I watched. I don't know if it was a recent movie, but it was just like fucking Ryan Reynolds just shows up there. I can't remember it right now, but it's like with Ryan Johnson. Yeah, thank you. It's with Ryan Johnson has Joseph Gordon-Levitt in all of his films somehow.
Yes.
It's just like, yeah, it's fucking Chris Hemsworth is the dad. I don't know. Yeah,
that'd be wild. Yeah.
No, he's the dad in Star Trek. So
he is the dad in Star Trek.
I one other thing that I didn't notice, but I read about it, and then you pick it up on second watch. But Hitler's uniform keeps changing, and it's actually like, I guess, somewhat accurate to the way his uniform changed, like in real life. But like at the end, he's wearing this like very gray uniform as he has like the bullet hole through his head. So just like, it's also showing like the deterioration of Hitler going on. It's the same as like the deterioration with Jojo and his relationship. So,
and also the deterioration of the German army, like as a whole throughout.
Yeah. Well, we saw that with them like all being imprisoned and shot to death. So that's how they depicted that.
Yeah.
I don't think I need to ask what we all thought of it, because I'm pretty sure we all just like loved on this movie for 2 hours. But I love it. Fucking great.
Yeah,
it's so good.
I'm glad I watched it finally, and I'm mad at you, David, for partially it's your fault on why I waited this long.
I can't wait on you. Like, I'm not gonna wait on you. Sorry. Just get your life together. Nikko, I want to say thanks for joining us on this, because you're fucking great. You're making us look bad in a bunch of these spots. Actually, what you guys missed.
No, that was all my own selection. Nothing missed. That was just
analysis of the film.
That's supplemental for me. But dude, you guys are fucking legends. Thanks so much for having me. I can't wait to be back. Hopefully we can all do something cool soon again. and talk about some other things. And I'm going to cheesily say this again. I'm so glad I finally got to be on. I finally watched.
Well, thanks for listening to another episode of I Finally Watched. This is David.
And this is Alon, and I finally watched Jojo Rabbit.